Wherever they go, they repeat the same scenario. They kill, they torture, they rape people, they eliminate Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian history. We managed to learn, we managed to study their playbook. We know what they say, we know their narratives, we know their actors, we know their channels. Generally, we know what to expect from Russian information machine. Only united we can win, and this is our common enemy. And yes, we had a lot of different moments in our history, but still we can overcome them because our enemy is much more dangerous for our future than all those difficult moments from our past. We are very grateful. We are very, very grateful. I'm starting to cry right now when I say it.
Ten materiał powstał także dzięki darczyńcom Nowej Konfederacji. Jeśli chcesz, żeby takie całkowicie niezależne analizy spraw o strategicznym znaczeniu dalej powstawały, rozważ proszę dołączenie do grona darczyńców Nowej Konfederacji. Bartłomiej Radziejewski.
Hello, my name is Bartłomiej Radziejewski and I welcome you in Real Talks, a program of strategic problems when I talk with, in which I talk with very important persons from the public area. Today, my and your guest is Lyubov Cybulska, the leading expert, Ukrainian expert in hybrid war, an advisor to the government of Ukraine and founder of the Center of Strategic Communication and Information Security under the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello.
Ms. Cybulska, at first I would like to ask you about your way to the point where you are now. Was it very difficult, and how it was to become the leading Ukrainian expert on hybrid war?
Thank you for this question. I think it happened very naturally because many years ago I used to be a journalist before Maidan, but then after Maidan, after 2014, I was invited by one of the Ukrainian NGO to join the government as an advisor, communication advisor. It was a project called One Voice Policy, and the idea was to embed professionals from the private sector to government institutions. Because at that moment, when the war started, back in 2014, government institutions, particularly communications, lacked communication expertise. So that's how I became an advisor to the Chief of General Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces, General Muzhenko, and I haven't learned all these things in theory. I learned it through practice, because at that moment we didn't really realize the range of hybrid attacks that Russia was conducting against us. So we just faced them, and we were looking for solutions how to counter it. And since then, I'm still learning and still fighting in this field.
Mm-hmm. May I ask you a bit more personal question?
Of course.
Being
how much?
You will see in just a second. Being such an attractive woman as you are, does it help or makes harder a career in your industry? It is very masculinized, right?
No, I think that people in Ukraine and in Poland, they're very attractive, so it doesn't make any difference. I never think about it, and I think it's not really a time for thinking or discussing this, to be honest.
Okay. So let's go to the more serious and strategic questions. What's the state of this war right now? There are different opinions on who is winning this war. What's your opinion right now?
I think that now we are entering a very difficult stage. Obviously, all sides, both sides, and I would also say our partners as well, not just Russia and Ukraine, all are pretty much tired, exhausted, and we do not see how it might end in the nearest future. Like, it's difficult for us to predict what might happen for Ukraine, for instance, to win, but also for Russia to win. I wouldn't say that either of the sides have any significant successes on the battlefield. We know that Russia started offensive a few weeks ago, but still this offensive is not successful. So they do not know how to break it through. On the other hand, we see that Ukraine is not going to go counteroffensive. So it means that we now have this defensive war, and the difficulty is that we all are tired, and we understand that it might take long. So we have to prepare for a long run. We would like to, of course, do it quicker, but we still need more weapons and we need more people. And since we are tired right now, and Russia knows it, they exploit our internal vulnerabilities. They exploit all these problems that we currently have in Ukraine, including exhaustion, including fatigue. So for us, it's much more difficult because their information space is very closed, but for them it's easier because Ukraine is the democracy, and they can basically fuel all these existing narratives and inflame them to some enormous, proportions. That's why some of these operations of influence are pretty successful, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the problem of serious shortages in military personnel. They are really very serious. Considering that, is it possible for you to still thinking about such ambitious goals like regaining all the territories? Because
I wouldn't. I don't want to comment this since you introduced me as a government advisor. I think it wouldn't be right to speak on behalf of the government on this. Obviously, we would like to establish control over all our territories, internationally recognized borders, but preconditions for this so far are not that welcoming, as we know, right? So from what we see right now, Ukraine is not preparing offensive operations. Ukraine is going to defend existing territories, and now the main goal is to collect the number of voices, international voices, to bring to the same table all our partners. And now, as far as we know, it's more than 100 countries, those who agreed to participate in the Peace Summit, which is going to happen soon. So our idea is to have this international coalition and international understanding of peace on Ukrainian terms, not on Russian terms, because we know what Russian peace means. They just want to gain some time and, regroup, strengthen their forces, strengthen their positions on the occupied territories, and then attack us again. So we have to understand, all of us, that we have to weaken Russia to the point when Russia doesn't want to attack us or anybody else again. So that's
Okay.
why we shouldn't agree on Russia's vision of peace, because they do not really need, these territories they occupied. Look at the map. This is the huge country. They don't need more territories. What they want is to eliminate our statehood, our identity as Ukrainians. And also, they, of course, want to have access to other countries that Russia is interested in, like
Excuse me, but
Poland, Baltic states, and others.
let me interfere you. Isn't it so that Russia wants final political results, and these political results may not be the Eurasian of Ukrainian state, but it may be satisfied with the state of neutralizing Ukraine strategically, in the sense that you will not go to NATO and to European Union. What do you think about it? And what's
I think that this is not the goal. Russia was perfectly aware that we were not going to be accepted by NATO, and Ukrainian people didn't express this will before. We wanted to join NATO only when Russia attacked us. So it's very important not to mix up, the reason and consequences. So the reason why we want to join NATO is because we have been attacked by Russia, and not vice versa. This is what they want to impose to other countries, saying that NATO is coming closer and closer to our borders. That's why we had to attack Ukraine. But this is not true. They attacked us in 2014, when according to all polls, the number of those Ukrainian citizens who wanted to join NATO was not very high.
Okay, but it was just after the very important steps to be closer to and allied to European Union.
Yes, but it doesn't mean that European Union is a danger for. It's not military alliance. It's not a danger for Russia. So from what we see, when we look at this war, especially the last 2 years, we know for sure that wherever they go, they repeat the same scenario. They kill, they torture, they rape people, they eliminate Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian history. So it's so obviously, since this war is so genocidal, that their main goal is to destroy our identity and destroy our statehood.
Yes. Let's go to the topic of hybrid war, your specialties. How hybrid this war is? For many years many people were imagining that completely new kind of warfare is emerging in the history, and no more massive panzer attacks and things like that. There will be drones, satellites, and so forth and so on. But what we observed very clearly in the first days of this invasion is a comeback of a very classical kind of warfare, right? So massive panzer attacks, of course, with satellites, drones, and so forth and so on, but very classical warfare. How hybrid this war is?
You're right. With change of times, the face of wars are changing, and we see that now this is a new generation of warfare, which combines all these very kinetic approaches, but also hybrid approaches. And many people tend to think that when we speak hybrid, we mean, first of all, disinformation and cyber attacks. I do not want to narrow down hybrid just to these two things. I would also add many others, like political pressure, diplomatical pressure, economical interference, That's what we used to have here in Ukraine. Like economical presence of Russia was huge. And many others, like political corruption, for instance. So now, obviously, this war has become much more real for many Ukrainians. Before 2022, not that many people had been noticing the war because it was so far away, and still people were dying on Donbass, but in Donbass region. But still, it was not so real, so material. But now we see the consequences basically every day. Even tonight, they launched missiles over Ukraine, and in some regions, people were killed. So this war came to many people, and now, yes, it is very kinetic at one point, but I would say that this is like some very interesting mixture of, basically First World War and the future wars. Because on the one hand, you have all these, trenches, wars, you have very classical, all those things that you have seen in the movies about Second and First World War. But on the other hand, you have these drones attack, and you have all these streaming videos from the battlefield, so you can actually watch the war live. But also, the very important role plays the society, and society is affected by, first of all, information or malign information. Let's put it this way, because society is unlike in other previous wars in the 20th century. For instance, society was not so important, so crucial, the opinion of the society. But now it's extremely crucial, and we see, for instance, how the effectiveness, the spirit of our soldiers are being affected by the sentiments or the spirit of the rest of the society. It's extremely important for us to protect all our citizens right now, all the society, because it has direct impact on what is happening on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And what's the current?
I will just add that there are generations of warfare, right? So, and just to the recent times, we knew about 4 main generations of warfare, because every time with invention of new technologies, the face of war changed. So now we have, as many experts say, the 5th generation of warfare. And it's totally different from what we had 50 or 70 years ago.
Sure. And
I would even say that it's different from what we had I'm sorry that I'm interrupting you, but I just have this, thoughts coming, that it's totally different from what we had in 2015. And that's what I hear from our military, those who participated in the war back then, when Russia attacked Ukraine, attacked eastern regions of Ukraine and Crimea. And when they fight right now, they say that it's not the same. So go on.
May I? Really?
Please, sorry.
No, it was very, very interesting to hear, but it's a bit spontaneous. My next question is about specifically about the Russian disinformation, also your specialty. What is the state of the Russian strategy of disinformation and policy of disinformation right now? What are the main goals and main actions of it during this period of the war?
The main goal is to reduce our willing to fight, to reduce our mobilization, and obviously decrease the support we have right now from our partners. But generally, when we speak about their strategy, I would say that Russia has changed its strategy only once, like significantly. It was in 2015, the beginning of 2016. Back then, they stopped promoting Ruski Mir, which is Russian world ideological concept among Ukrainians, because before that they had been promoting, thinking that there would be some critical mass of people who would like to join this whole ideology about the Russian world. But then when they attacked us in 2014, in a year, they realized that those people who were fighting against Russia on the battlefield, they had Russian names. They were speaking Russian, many of them. Obviously not all of them, but maybe half. And still, it didn't really matter to them. They still didn't want to have Russia here. So then Russia realized that it's time to change it. And they realized that they in order to shake us, to weaken us, they can just use our own vulnerabilities. That's what they do now. That's what they did in the United States. That's what they did during Brexit. That's what they do in Poland. So they take existing problem and then strengthen it, and then fuel all these conflicting narratives and making people fight with each other. And then when we are fully distracted.
I think that this is very important to underline, right? There are existing problems which they go into, not creating problems from.
Yeah, because it takes much more efforts to create new. Of course, sometimes they create, like, the main problem right now in Ukraine is war, and all problems that we have right now is created by Russia, right? And this fatigue and the number of people who are without legs and hands, and mental problems, and all these things, they were caused by Russia. But when I speak about these tactics, I mean that they do not promote their own image. They just take what bothers us and they use it against us. Of course, some of these problems are very real and might be big, but some of them are, they exist, but they are not very big until you do not, fuel it. So that's how they use the topic of language in Ukraine, topic of mobilization. For instance, they promote videos. They take existing videos and promote them on social media, showing that Ukrainian men are being detained by mobilization centers people, detained very forcefully, that these people are and they take away the phones. So basically, they violate human rights during this detention. And of course, these stories exist, but it doesn't mean that all mobilization centers work this way. And there are many very professional, nice stories, but they are not being promoted. So, and the same with corruption, for instance. They take some topic and they just fuel it and they spread it in mass on different platforms like TikTok. Like TikTok is one of the most popular platforms right now for Russian disinformation, or Telegram, which is, like, again, one of the major problems for us here in Ukraine. It's much more difficult for them to do something like this on Facebook, because Facebook trying to investigate these activities, which is called coordinated inauthentic activities. But still, they managed to find some loopholes. Like, for instance, they use advertisement, or they create clones of official pages, and they spread false narratives from these pages. And then sometimes they pay to advertise these pages on Facebook. So there are many different ways. So the main idea is to take what bothers us and make us fight with each other. And obviously, when we fight with each other, then our attention is distracted. We are not focused on our enemy. We are focused on each other, right? And we just don't have the same strengths, some same power to fight. And also, it's very demoralizing, when we fight with each other. It's very demoralizing for the armed forces, for the whole society. It impacts the spirit of our armed forces, and that's what I hear from our soldiers right now. That it's very difficult to protect Ukraine when we hear all these stories about internal conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I've been there for 10 years, and I remember the same stories from 2014 and 2015. But the problem is that back then we didn't realize what was going on. We didn't know, their techniques. Now we know them much better. We managed to learn, we managed to study their playbook. We know what they say. We know their narratives. We know their actors. We know their channels. Generally, we know what to expect from Russian information machine. So that's why for now it's much more difficult for them to succeed. But still, there are some operations, information operations, that are quite successful.
Mm-hmm. And your general judgment, how effective all these actions and strategies are in this phase of the war?
Unfortunately, pretty effective, because it lays on existing fatigue, existing exhaustion. This whole psychological condition that we in which we are right now, and that's why some of these operations, especially on mobilization or demobilization, are quite successful. But also sometimes it's not just a matter of communication, right? Like when I hear that communication of mobilization campaign was not effective in Ukraine. Yes, maybe, because sometimes it's not the matter of communication, it's the matter of initial decision, initial solution. It might be not a communication problem at all, because communication derives from the solutions. So unfortunately, some of these campaigns are effective because in some of these areas we are not capable to manage this whole issue really effectively. But again, it's a first time all of us, this whole generation, right? I think it's for us, it's the first time when we face the problem of this scale. So nobody is prepared. And I think that, as we say, nobody was born for the war. So we have to come up with the solutions during combat, being in the process of fighting. That's not that we can just read from books, something we can read and learn. But this war is very new to all of us, to the world.
I assume that, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were talking mostly or only about Ukraine. I think that we should now differentiate the problem in the geographical terms, right? So Russian disinformation has a global scale, right? Or at least international scale, and it has important goals in Ukraine, it has important goals in Western Europe, in United States, and also in global South. How would you differentiate the problem in geographical terms?
I would say that when it comes to the West, the main goal of Russia is to weaken the West and to make the West not so holistic, not so united. But when it comes to the global South, the main idea is to make these countries, I know that many of them, they don't really like when they're called Global South because they're very different. But still, the idea is to make them to oppose the West. So what Russia suggests to the countries of Global South is that join coalition with Russia, and then we can balance power in the world. We can actually oppose to the West, because West has been very oppressing towards you for so many years. You know, all these white people, rich white people, which have been mean to you. So now you actually have a chance to pay back. So join this coalition, and here we are, and we can create another center of power. That's what Russia says to these countries. And in the West, their main idea to shake them, to make them not united, to make them, squirrel with each other, to divide. And because when we are divided, obviously, we are much weaker.
And what are the most important successes of Russian disinformation in the West recently?
I think that polarization within the United States is very dangerous, and to the large extent, Russia is one to blame for this, because they put a lot of resources into pouring all these, conflicting narratives back in 2016 during the elections. And they do it right now. And but also generally, when Brexit, yes, of course, it was up to the British people, but it was clear that Russia was very much interested in supporting, again, all these conflicting narratives. When it comes to Ukraine and Poland, this whole grain deal also was heavily affected by Russia. So the problem exists indeed, right? But then they just make people much more aggressive towards each other. Mm-hmm. That's what they did in Poland, and that's what they did here in Ukraine, trying to convince us that Poles are not our friends. But we know how Poland accepted us, how Poland helped us, and the very prompt and very sincere reaction of Ukrainian people was to actually differentiate and all these efforts, and people were saying that no, Poland is our friend, and let's see how they treat our refugees and how they open their arms when the war broke out. But this campaign is definitely artificially fueled. So let's differentiate. And I saw these messages, I saw such posts in mass on Ukrainian social media. So it's not that easy to foolish Ukrainians because we know, first of all, how Russians work, how they operate, but we also remember how Poland treated us when the war started. So I think that our reaction of our people were pretty smart in this case. So I wouldn't say that it was super successful, but the attempt was very serious.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned polarization in the United States, but we have also very intense political polarization in Poland. Do you think that it is also in important part Russian work?
That's what they're interested in. So obviously it happens naturally because of different things. And, the fact that we have so many ways, so many platforms, so many technologies to express ourselves is also one of the reasons. But since I've been learning Russian techniques for many years, I know that they do it. So they do exploit the existing cracks within the society. And obviously, when we are polarized, then it's much more difficult for us to. So what polarization is doing to us? It makes us much more aggressive. Suddenly, we do not think that the other side is a human being, right? And that we can find some compromise, that we can find some solution. This is very dangerous, because when it comes within one society or within one nation, it might lead to very bad consequences.
Mm-hmm. Listening to you on this topic and also to other disinformation experts, we got a picture of overwhelming Russian influences in the international scale. How is it possible, considering how small in the terms of economy Russia is? It has just about 2 billions of GDP, while United States has 28, right? It is an economy of the size of Mexico or Canada. So how can they have enough resources to make all these goals happen?
It's a great question. It's $1 million question, because many people think that, okay, you exaggerate the problem. Russia cannot be responsible for all these things. And it's true, some of these things happen naturally. But the problem is that, first of all, the budget for information operations is not decreasing, is not reduced. And it's been just, increasing all these years in Russia. So they do spend a lot of money on this. But second of all, that the main idea for Russian, that's called propaganda machine, is to find these weak spots. Once they find it, it's not the matter of resources. Once they have it and they start promoting these narratives, there will be many so-called useful idiots which would pick up these narratives and spread it voluntarily. So any PSYOP is is successful only when it has a lot of useful idiots who are actually passing it over to new audiences. And when it comes to Russian information operations, sometimes it's not that they have to pay and spread these narratives on all social media. Sometimes it's just matter of inflaming the match. You have to just point out to some of the problems and start speaking about it, and people will just take it and disseminate it. That's why it's so important not to be part of these efforts, not to be the instrument, not to be a multiplier of Russian narratives, and to think very thoroughly, not to be so emotional when we spread something on our social media.
Mm-hmm. And don't you think it is more about determination, cohesiveness, and the will to act, things like that? Let us go for a moment to the ancient history, right? It is shocking when you realize that multi-million Western Roman Empire, multi-million in terms of population size, was destroyed by just dozens of thousands of barbarians, right? So there are situations when determined minority may completely destroy much larger political organism or population, right? So isn't it so that the West is uncohesive, Russia is cohesive? West lacks the will to act, and Russia is very much determined.
To be honest, I don't think so. I do not think so because, first of all, I really do not think that Russia is winning. There is no clear indication that Russia is winning. Yes, in some parts of the world, their narratives are more successful than in the others, but generally, they lost how many? 500,000 people. They have to fight for small city of Bakhmut or of Diivka for many months. So they are not successful on the battlefield. They waste so much money on the war. I think that so far they might be perceived as successful because they are very monolithic. They looked very monolithic, and this is the problem. You mentioned the Roman Empire, so all the empires, they have to adjust to new realities. When they are not adaptable, then when they are not adjusting, they fail. And that's what might happen to Russia. They want to stay, they want to be an empire, they want to stay as an empire, but they have to adjust to new challenges. Which happens in the world. So if they do not adjust, they will fail. Hopefully, I really hope that Russia one day will collapse, and we will still be alive when it happens. So no, I don't have this perception. Moreover, I think that the West, since it's democratic and free, is much more adaptable.
Okay. And about specific goals of Russian propaganda, don't you think that some kind of pacifistic movements are encouraged right now by Russia? I know you don't want especially talk about Polish internal affairs, but just an example from Poland, we have a very strange movement of pacifists protesting against going to the war, which emerged just after it was made very clear that we are not going for this war, right? We are encouraging, supporting Ukraine, but we are not going to this war. It was very clear on the NATO level, on the Polish level, and just after that, a pacifistic movement of people protesting against going for this war emerged. What are your thoughts on that, considering the general agenda of Russian disinformation?
So you see, from what you just said, once they sense that there is something to discuss, there is ground for discussion, they immediately fuel it. They start promoting these narratives. My take on this is that yes, indeed, in many countries they want to show, Russia wants to show that it's not up to Russia to stop this war. It's up to Ukraine, and Ukraine is so willing to fight that Ukraine doesn't want any peace, that Ukraine is actually very aggressive actor in this war, which is not true. It's up to Russia to stop it. They should just stop fighting and take their forces from our land. It's not Ukraine which attacked Russia. We are not on their soil. And we are fighting on our land, on our soil. So this narrative is extremely dangerous, and it's effective in those countries which do not really know what's going on. These people, sometimes they say, well, we don't know what's happening, but probably all sides are to blame. There should be something that, why Russia attacked Ukraine, and Ukraine is not perfect, and so on and so on. So, and I know that this narrative works pretty well in the countries of Global South. When I travel to these countries like Indonesia or somewhere else, they were saying, like, why don't you want to sit and negotiate? Because we are not going to negotiate peace on Russian terms. It's not like we are on the position that we have to negotiate. We want to fight and free our lands. Once Russia agrees to get out of Ukraine, we can negotiate on other stuff, about returning Ukrainian children, around 20,000 children that were kidnapped by Russia. Imagine, like, this is the huge number. About returning our POWs and so on. But the first precondition is to leave our territories and stop fighting.
Mm-hmm. How has the Russian hybrid and disinformation strategy and policy evolved in recent 2.5 years?
I would say that when they started back then, 2 years ago, they thought that they could rely on their existing playbook. But then they realized that we had already learned that playbook and we were prepared. So they started inventing new techniques. Now we see that they have a very good understanding of what is going on in different countries, in Poland, in Ukraine. They know sociology. They know sentiments of this among the society, and they have very clear and doable, very plausible KPIs what they want to reach. They also do not invent some completely new narratives. They try to rely on those that exist. Because, as you said, it's very expensive to create something new. You never know whether it will work or not. But when they take something, so that's why they have to monitor what's going on in our countries pretty well. And of course, they support in different ways political parties and polarize society via political forces. This is what they do in the United States, and I'm sure in Poland as well, and in Ukraine as well. So basically, they try, they do everything possible to make our politicians, our parties, not to act in, united, but to fight with each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, going to the final of this conversation, what should happen? Because I got some unclear picture of the future of this, of in your opinion, of the future of this war. What should happen? Please tell me what should happen for you to win this war finally.
To be honest, I think it's a combination of different factors. First of all, we need to be quite strong to be able to destroy Russian depots, Russian weapon storages, Russian forces on the ground. We need to be strong militarily. Then we have to be united. Our society has to have clear and very proactive intention to fight. And we have to have support of our partners. Obviously, without that, it's going to be very difficult. But I would add also a sprinkle of black swan in Russia. That would be very, very good to have some, Prigozhin gate or something like this. It would really help us, because obviously their system might look very strong, but it's not. And Prigozhin actually showed that it's not that strong, that it's very elusive, right? That it might crumble. When something happens, it might crumble at once. Mm-hmm. So obviously there are many, many factors for this. Also, I would like to tackle probably this whole nuclear weapon thing. I think that Russia is playing this card pretty successfully, because so many countries, so many people are so frightened by a nuclear weapon. But the thing is that nuclear weapon is is extremely successful and impactful while it's not used. So when they use it, it will mean that they lost. It will mean that they have no cards in their pocket. So that's why probably they will not be using it. So we should do what we have to do, not to be so scared by this factor.
Okay. And a really final question, just optional. I suppose that you weren't very often in Polish media. So if you would like to tell something to Polish audience, something specific, now please do it.
My message to our Polish friends are the same. We are very grateful. We are very, very grateful. I'm starting to cry right now when I say it. And yeah, let's stay united, because only united we can win. And this is our common enemy. And yes, we had a lot of different moments in our history, but still we can overcome them, because our enemy is much more dangerous for our future than all those difficult moments from our past.
Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you for this message, and thank you for all today's conversation very much. Lyubov Cybulska, a leading Ukrainian expert on hybrid war and advisor to the government of Ukraine, was our guest today. Thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you.